Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes. Hi, I'm Dawn, and this is a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction and audio fiction. This very special two-parter is written by Shika, and she's over on Deviat, so make sure you go and give her some love. The descriptions will be down below, and also the art, the stunning art featured in this one is by Cassarilla over on Tumblr, and her descriptions and information's down below. This is all part of Fusion November, so I hope you enjoy it. Make sure you smash the like button, comment down below what you think of it, because part 2 will be coming out next week, and subscribe if you haven't already, because there's just so much happening and you don't want to miss out on part 2. And enjoy Lost in the Crowd. Lost in a Crowd, Part 1, Adrien's POV. The Agreste Foundation Heroes Day Gala was normally a stuffy affair. Adrien always saw it as a way for Paris' wealthy elite to polish their egos and brag about their latest accomplishments, at the single price of €1,000 a ticket. All in the name of charity, of course. Sure, the food was good, and the special performances were often pretty cool, but Adrien would have preferred to go to his friend's free concert and eat pizza. But since his father had become a near recluse, he had to represent the family name and the brand at these silly events. He was scheduled to perform as usual this year's Bach Prelude in C major, and he would do anything to please his father, but the thought of spending the evening in a tuxedo and making small talk with his father's business associates was as appealing as a trip to the dentist. That is, until he saw the program for the night's event and saw that the guest of honor was to be Ladybug herself. Adrien couldn't believe his eyes. He could count the fingers on one hand the amount of times he had interacted with Ladybug as his civilian self, and each time found himself nervous, sweating, and probably smiling like an idiot. He started to have those reactions now just at the thought. Ladybug would be here, in the same room with him, for several hours. She could hear him perform. Maybe, just maybe, she would allow him a dance. His cheeks burned at the very thought. Guests started to arrive, and Natalie stationed him with the other VIPs in the receiving line to greet them. Shaking hands with the men and bowing over the hands of the women, his mind went onto autopilot, relying on muscle memory to perform the actions and murmur the polite nothings such occasions required, until he briefly locked gazes with bluebell eyes behind a red mask. Ladybug was dressed for the occasion in a black origami wrap dress, which flared out, sweeping across the floor, and made the sleeves of a red suit seem like evening gloves, whilst hiding the rest. Panels of the black gauze fabric were attached to the shoulders by identical red stone brooches, and tied at the wrists, creating an illusion of wings that billowed and fluttered when she moved. Her dark hair was swept into a soft swirl at the top of her head, with little curls hanging down to frame her face. Adrien's breath caught in her throat. She never looked lovelier than she did in that moment. Natalie murmured from beside him, "Mr. Agreste, Adrien, may I introduce Ladybug, the hero of Paris." "Ladybug, thank you very much for accepting our invitation," his father replied from the screen of the tablet Natalie held. "Thank you very much for inviting me, Mr. Agreste," she replied smoothly, nodding her head to the tablet as if he was present. "I must say, I find your outfit to be most ingenious," his father responded unexpectedly. "Who is the designer?" "I did it myself, sir. I was inspired by one of your own gowns from about 10 years ago, except yours was done in royal blue. It's one of my favourites. I lengthened the skirt, altered the neckline to create a wrap shoulder cap, and added the wings." "Oh, yes, the Morning Glory. That was one of my favourites from that season. I hope you enjoy your evening." Now it was Adrien's turn. His palms were sweating, and he hoped she wouldn't notice through the white evening gloves. Her eyes were shining as they met his with a sweet smile. The smile he sent back was wider and more genuine than the one he had been wearing up until now. When she offered him her hand, he bowed over it and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Even though he had performed this gesture with her hundreds of times over the last 3 years, tonight it felt much more intimate than it did without the mask. A flush burnt his cheeks as he rose to meet her eyes again. He was surprised and pleased to see a matching blush blossom out from under the bottom of her mask. Ladybug blushed. Ladybug blushed over him. Oh, Carambear, consider his world rocked. "It's an honor to see you again, Ladybug," he murmured, trying to keep from blurting out something ridiculous and ruin the moment. "Yes, it's nice to see you without an Akuma being involved," she replied simply. Without breaking eye contact, she gave his fingers a subtle squeeze. He blushed again, realizing he was still holding her hand. Giving it a brief squeeze of his own, he let her fingers slip from his. Losing their touch felt like a blow to his heart. He saw her give him a sneaky wink as she wandered off into the room and was quickly lost in the crowd. He wanted to follow her, to talk with her, and yet he was locked into his host duties, delaying the chance to be with her. Whilst making small talk with a famous chef and the conductor of the Paris Opera, Adrien daydreamed about escorting her to a seat at dinner. He could almost feel her hand curl around his arm as she smiled at a clever comment he made, but his dream crashed down when Chloe's name was brought to him on a little card indicating his dinner companion. During dinner, he was seated at the head table with her, but she was opposite him, the empty chair that symbolized his father's presence between them. The mayor, who sat on her other side, monopolized her attention during the whole of the meal, and Chloe did the same to him. The best he could do was exchange glances with her across the table during lulls in the conversation. She locked gazes with him during a particular boring description the mayor was giving of his recent re-election campaign, rolled her eyes and hid a yawn behind her napkin. Adrien grinned, that tiny interaction thrilling him as if she shared a secret with him alone. He didn't have much hope on the dance floor either. He was talking to the English ambassador when he saw Ladybug dancing with one of the Martin twins. He hoped it wasn't Jean-Marc. He had a reputation of being handsy, but his brother Michael was a decent sort. He spent his time dancing with Chloe, Kagami, a slew of other daughters of his father's business associates, girls whose parents should not think he ignored them. He at least had the satisfaction of seeing Ladybug turn down that pompous, no-talent XY for a dance in favour of Robert Dubois, who blushed a bright red as he painfully shuffled her through the dance with a starstruck look on his face. The next 2 hours were a dull blur, punctuated by flashes of his lady across the ballroom. He practically itched to dance with her, to take her hand in his and cradle her waist while leading her through a waltz, to stare into her ocean eyes, maybe even charm her somehow with pleasant conversation, but it was all for naught. The time came for speeches, and Ladybug was up first as the guest of honour. Adrien couldn't wait to hear what she was going to say, considering she rarely seemed as comfortable with public appearances as he did. He wondered for the millionth time what kind of girl she was under the mask, what she liked in school, what her hobbies were, what she liked to do with friends. Whoever she is, she's the kindest, funniest, most amazing girl in the world, he thought, gazing at her slim form admiringly. To the layman, she looked poised and confident, but he had been her partner for 3 years and knew the way she bit the corner of her lip ever so slightly, or how she held her hands in front of her signified she was nervous. He tried to catch her eye and succeeded. He gave her a small smile and a wink. Suddenly, she stopped biting her lip and the smile became more relaxed and genuine. Ministers, Mr. Egress, honoured guest, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for asking me to join you this evening. My partner Cat Noir sends his apologies and regrets his absence, but he had prior commitments and couldn't attend tonight. So you are stuck with the less entertaining of the two of Heroes of Paris, I'm afraid. Though if any of you tell him, I might just akumatize due to embarrassment. Polite laughter rippled through the audience, but Adrien struggled to suppress the blush at her unknowing compliment. Little does she know. I want to speak to you about a subject that is very close to my heart. With today being Heroes Day, many people struggle to find a way to do their part. They think they have to do something big or important to be a hero, and I know what you're saying. Ladybug, you are a superhero with special skills and to fight evil. And you would be right, but I would like to tell you a story about two of the greatest heroes in my life. The first is my dad. He is kind and gentle and generous and is always willing to reach out to others. He has practically adopted all my friends and works very hard to take care of our family and those in need. He doesn't need superpowers to do that because he already has the one thing we all need, a caring heart. The second hero in my life is a boy who I met on the first day of being Ladybug. I'm not ashamed to tell you, I was afraid of Stoneheart, afraid of failure, and was sure that there had been some sort of mistake, that the universe, fate, or destiny could not have meant me for this job. But this boy, even though he didn't know me, he believed in me wholeheartedly. He told me I could do this job, that I could be Ladybug and save all of us from Hawkmoth and his supervillains. I wouldn't be the person or the hero that I am today without his words to spur me on. So I share these words with you now. We can do this. Each one of us can make a difference, whether it's by donating to charity, volunteering at a soup kitchen, hospital or homeless shelter, by sending cards and visiting shut-ins, to even just sharing smiles and hugs. Because we all have many talents and abilities to offer to this big, beautiful world and our fellow travelers throughout life. Please join us in this worthy cause, for I know that every one of you has it in you to be heroic when you are needed most. Thank you, and Happy Heroes Day. As applause filled the room, Adrien blushed for real. She thinks Cat is her hero? I never knew. His heart swelled for his lady as he watched her make her way off the stage for the next speaker. He remembered that day as if it was etched into the surface of his heart. He had been so ready to be a superhero, to have that escape from his lonely life and all the crazy things that went with it, that he hadn't even stopped to learn the rules of this deadly game he had delved into. She hadn't believed she was ready, but she was smart and fixed her mistakes and challenged Hawkmoth's avatar with confidence and intensity that astonished him. They had been joined as partners that day, but his heart had belonged to her from that moment on. To know that he was her hero when she did so much for him and all of Paris touched his heart in a way that she would never know and he could never explain to her. His mind wandered during the speeches and presentations and the first few performances, his thoughts drifting to the girl he knew was sitting somewhere behind him. It wasn't until Natalie tapped him on the shoulder that he remembered he had to perform. His name was announced and he rose to his feet. He knew he was a talented pianist and generally only suffered from performance anxiety when his father was present, but knowing that Ladybug was watching him perform added a whole new level of nerves. "Just keep it together, Adrien," he chanted to himself as he climbed the steps to the stage. "You can go through this piece in your sleep, no problem. Yeah, but having Ladybug here is like a dream, and if I make a mistake, Father will be furious and everyone will think I can't cut it, including Ladybug." His mind argued back. He felt the little nudge in his pocket of his tuxedo jacket where Plague had taken up residence for the evening, a sign that his little friend was sending him a silent vote of confidence. Adrien looked out at the audience and caught his partner's eye at the end of the second row. Her hands were clasped on her knees, and the twisted remains of her program littered her lap. Her eyes were eager, and her smile was wide with pleasure. His heart pounded, and he tried to compose himself as he sat down at the piano. He didn't need the music in front of him, but he kept his eyes focused on the keys to keep them from following his heart. As he began to play, he felt himself drift aloft the waves of music, the notes rippling through the hall like flower petals falling onto the still pond. In his mind, he wasn't playing for a room full of people. He was playing to her. His heart made this song to her beauty, her kindness, her bravery, and his fingers sent it out to her, telling her how much he loved her, how much he wanted to share his life with her, to remove the mask that hid them and be able to call her by her name. As the last notes died away, the hall was silent for the 3 heartbeats before erupting into applause. Adrien stood, stepped away from the bench and bowed. As he rose, he saw Ladybug leading the wave of rising listeners to a standing ovation for him. He struggled to keep his face professional while his heart soared, her shining eyes as she called out, "Bravo!" He knew he should act composed, or else Natalie and his father would chastise him later for it, but he needed some way to express his elevation. He placed his hand over his heart and bowed again before leaving the stage. There were a few other performances that went by in a rosy blur of anticipation for him. He hoped he could grab her attention for a conversation before everyone left, but the look of a black cat was his once again. He was cornered by the conductor of the Paris Opera and the pianist Louis Latour to congratulate him on his interpretation of his piece. After that, he got stuck in a long conversation with Mrs. Tsurugi regarding fencing and the current Olympic candidates. As Kagami's mother went into detail about the various deficiencies of the various contenders, he saw Ladybug standing by the door, thanking Natalie and the other hosts. She glanced around the room and her eyes landed on him, a slight look of disappointment ghosting across her face. He reached out a hand to her as if to stop her from going. He opened his mouth, though what he meant to call out he didn't know, but Kagami tapped him on the arm apologetically. She saw where he was looking and gave him a sympathetic look. He sighed, locked eyes with his partner, and shot her a sad look and a shake of the head. He lowered his hand slowly, resigned to the lost opportunity to connect with the girl of his dreams that evening. 2 hours later, Adrien flopped onto his bed, heedless of the clothes that felt too restrictive and yet limp from being 6 hours in a warm, humid atmosphere. He let out a long sigh. "Ladybug was there, Plag," he groaned into his blanket. "I know, I was there," his Kwame said, making a beeline straight to the mini-fridge and his stock of cheese. "I could sense Sugar Cube. Besides, your heart only beats that way when you and the bug have gotten into tight quarters, or she puns back at you." "Sugar Cube? That's new." "Ladybug's Kwame," he replied through a mouthful of cheese. "Tiki is too sweet what I am to Camembert, hence her being my sugar cube." "If she's anything like Ladybug, she must not like that very much. After the last 200 years, she's gotten resigned to it," he replied with a shrug. Then, in a rare, gentle tone, "But she is my other half, so she puts up with me." "You miss her, don't you?" Plag's brilliant green eyes blinked at him quickly a few times. "Well," he said huffily, "I don't miss her complaining about my love of cheese." "Plag, I've never asked, but are you and Tiki a couple?" "Not in the human sense. We are more like twins, platonic soulmates. We're linked."
You're a little softy, aren't you? Just leave me to my cheese, kid. If you want to babble on about Ladybug, I might as well feed my empty stomach while I listen.
Taking that as a suggestion, it probably was, Adrien sighed.
I kissed her hand, and she gave me a standing ovation plaque, but I didn't have time to talk to her or ask her to dance or anything.
He groaned, rolled over and ran his hands through his hair, messing it up.
I would have given anything to spend some time with her this evening. Well, don't look now, kid, but you might be getting your wish.
His little friend muttered and swept under Adrien's pillow, dragging the camembert with him. As Adrien looked up, he heard a tapping on the window. Silhouetted against the golden glow of the city lights stood his partner, perched as lightly on the tiny ledge as the ladybug she was named for. He rushed to the window to let her in, wishing he hadn't been lying down in his tux or mussing his hair. She still wore the gorgeous black gown, but her hair was sweeping around her shoulders in soft waves. He could only stare at her like a vision, only barely aware that he offered her his hand to help her down. The zip of a yo-yo retracting brought him back to himself.
Ladybug, what are you doing here?
He stammered, rubbing his neck in embarrassment. Well, it looked like you wanted to speak to me earlier, and we never seemed to have a chance, she replied, shaking out the lines of her gown to hang straight again after her arrival.
Oh, not to seem impertinent, but how did you swing across the city in that? Don't get me wrong, you look beautiful, but isn't it a bit impractical?
He realized his words could suggest that he'd been staring at her and blushed effusively. She giggled, a light blush peeking out at him from underneath her mask. I suppose that might be considered an impertinent question from a civilian, but I'll let you in on a little secret. She leaned towards him conspiracially, and his heart started pounding. My yo-yo is bigger on the inside. I put the dress in there and then put it on again on your roof before knocking. I didn't want to be supporting spots if you were still in your tuxedo. That would have been embarrassing. She smiled at him, sending his insides into gymnastics routines he was unprepared for. He grinned back, fighting the blush that rushed into his cheeks at the thought of her getting dressed up again for him. But wait. Was the silence between them just as awkward for her as it was for him? Was she regretting coming? What had he been going to say anyway?
I'm not sure what I wanted to say now. I mean, aside from thanking you for saving me, as you have over the years, like Repose, my bodyguard at the wax museum, and then there was that girl last month. What did she call herself again?
Ease, she murmured, blushing. I have to admit, that was one of our most difficult fights, she sighed, fidgeting with a yo-yo.
Really? What made it so hard? I saw it on the news footage and you seemed to handle it pretty well.
That was one of the fights he didn't have many memories of, having taken a flower bomb to the chest 10 minutes into trying to keep Ladybug from being hit. Through her lashes, her blush darkening to blend perfectly with her mask. Ease was one of the smart ones. Turns out she's a big fan of yours and something set her off. After I rescued you, Cat Noir joined the fight and he got hit. Her lips thinned into a worry line, and she didn't meet his eyes. Cat fell in love with her and was about to give her his Miraculous. The look in his eyes when I had to take him away, and what he said when I had to restrain him. She shivered. Let's just say I never want to go through that again. Adrien's eyes widened. He had no idea. She hadn't told him, but her eyes looked miserable when they had exchanged their usual pound-it. Maybe she figured Adrien deserved to know since the girl had been after him. It didn't really matter now, but
it never occurred to him that his partner was so burdened by what happened when he took a hit for her. "I'm sure he only took the hit to keep you safe," he said tentatively. "I mean, he's your partner. Isn't that how you guys work? And you always bring him back."
"If it's okay, could we change the subject?" she asked, a shadow of nightmares in her bluebell eyes. "Cat Noir's my partner, my best friend, but if I keep thinking about how many times I've lost him..." Her voice trailed off, and he could see tears sparkling in the corner of her eyes. For a moment, he forgot he was Cat Noir just then and pulled her into a tight hug. She looked so haunted, and she didn't need to carry that burden alone. "I'm so sorry, my Ladybug. I didn't mean to put you through that." He thought she would push him away, and it is true that she stiffened for an instant when he wrapped his arms around her, but the way she relaxed into his embrace afterwards sent sparks racing along his nerves. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered into his shoulder, her arms wrapping around his waist in return. "I know you would never do anything to cause someone to be akumatized. You're too good for that." He let go of the breath he had been holding when he realized she assumed he meant he was sorry for one of the fans causing her so many problems. However, her words settled oddly in his mind. He pulled away just enough to look at her. "That almost sounds like you know me pretty well." She blushed and looked away, her hands moving to his chest at even this slight of a distance. "Well, I keep an eye on your school, especially your class. It has one of the highest akumatization rates in the city, you know." He narrowed his eyes at her. That sounded like a canned answer if ever he heard one. In fact, hadn't he once used that excuse with someone as Cat Noir? "But keeping an eye on my school, even my class in particular, wouldn't tell you what kind of person I am. And you and I both know what the papers and magazines print about celebrities is crafted to sell image, not truth." He knew his voice was dry with sarcasm and doubt, but tried to soften his tone with a smile. "Care to try again?" Ladybug bit her lower lip, which was distractingly cute, but it was clear it was from nervousness. She had a look of someone who was carefully weighing each word before they spoke. "It would not be a lie to say we hadn't run into each other a few times when I was not behind the mask." Her eyes were on his, and while he knew she wasn't telling him the whole truth, he could also tell that she wasn't telling him a lie. Not to mention, it was more than she'd ever shared with him as Cat Noir. Combine that with the fact that she was perfectly comfortable standing in his embrace, he was over the moon. "Besides," she added, a soft smile erasing the nervousness, "how else do you think I knew you were worthy of a miraculous aspect?" Now it was his turn to blush and laugh nervously. "Yeah, sorry about that." She put her finger against his lips to silence him. "Stop apologizing. That was my mistake, not yours. Most of the time I can trust my instinct, but that time things were more blurred than usual. You are still worthy. I just didn't match the miraculous well to you that time, so don't blame yourself." His curiosity was piqued, but he knew he shouldn't ask her what it meant. "Wow, thank you, Ladybug." "I was so pleased that I got to hear you play tonight," she said, obviously keen to change the subject. "It was very moving. You did a fantastic job." "Thanks," he murmured, his heart warming at her words. "That is the nicest compliment anyone has ever given me." "Really? Not even—" "Yeah," he interrupted, knowing where she was going, and you gave me my first standing ovation. I can't tell you how much that means to me." "You deserve it. You're amazing." Her eyes widened and her lips parted into an O. "I almost forgot." Ladybug let him go, and the sudden loss of her warmth left him aching to pull her back again. She retrieved her yo-yo from some hidden pocket and opened it up, pulled out a red rose out of the white light within and held it out to him. He stared at it, cheeks, neck, and ears burning. How many times he had tried to give her a rose as Cat, only for her to reject them. In fact, she had only accepted them twice from him, and now she was giving him one? Of course, she couldn't know that he was Cat Noir. Could she? What did this mean? His head swam with a torrent of confused theories, none of which made sense. When he didn't take it, she pulled it back slightly, looking embarrassed. I thought it was customary to give a red rose to a performer. Did I get that wrong? I've never been to a performance like that before." Adrien smiled as things clicked into place once more. "No, you're right. I just never expected it." He took the rose from her delicate fingers and leaned in to press a light kiss on her cheek. "Thank you, Ladybug. It means a lot to me." Between his boldness and her beautiful smile, his mouth had suddenly gone dry and his heart fluttered in his chest. "I would have given you an encore, but I wasn't sure if that was appropriate," she said with a sheepish glance. "I haven't been to many formal events, so I wasn't sure of the protocol." "How about a private encore now?" he asked, holding out his hand to her. She looked from his hand to his eyes and back again before shyly placing her fingers in his. The dynamic between them in this moment was so different, and yet it felt so right. This is what he'd been longing for, dreaming for the last 3 years, and even though he knew she didn't feel the same way towards Cat, she had hinted that she knew him without the mask, and maybe, just maybe. He guided her to his piano and took a seat at the bench, setting the rose she had given him on the music stand in place of the music sheet. He drew a deep breath and started playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was one of the most beautiful romantic pieces in his repertoire, and just as he had during the concert, his heart was sending her a message through the music. "I love you, my lady. I have loved you ever since the first day I met you. You were the brightest point of the light of my life, and I wish you could understand how much you mean to me. I wish you could let me show you." Halfway through, a hand crept to his shoulder, a fairy's touch, and he felt her lean in to watch his hands. He had to redouble his focus with her cheek brushing against his, that it still sent warm shivers through his core. Finally reaching the stanzas, he let the last chord fade away. Looking up, he found her staring at him with smiling lips parted and eyes shining with wonder. "That was beautiful, Adrien," she whispered. They were so close that her nose brushed his, and their breath blended in the space between. As if she suddenly realized this, she backed away slightly, her whole face turning pink. He couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. "So Ladybug has feelings for me? After all? She just doesn't know it's me." "Would you play me something else, or would that be imposing?" she asked nervously, tucking her loose hair behind her ear. "Probably to have something to do with her hands," Adrien thought fondly. "It would be a welcome imposition, I assure you, but I think I have a better idea." Pulling out his phone, he loaded up his classical playlist and set it on the music stand next to the rose. He stood and offered her his hand as the haunting strain of Mirage Amour started playing. She drifted into his arms again as if unsure of her welcome, unknown emotions flickering in her eyes. He swept her into a dance as he had been longing to do all evening. No, forever. Her hand on his shoulder was warm and her hair swirled to mimic her gown. He caught the scent of roses and chocolates. Now he understood why his mother had insisted he learn to waltz. It was intimate in a way that no modern dance could compare to, and he was sharing this intimacy with a woman he adored. If only she knew. This can't be real, he thought as he lost himself in her gaze. This must be a dream. But whose dream? She whispered, and he realized he had spoken aloud. It didn't matter. After the turmoil of the last 3 years, they could have this moment. He could have this moment with her. Even if it all fell apart afterwards, he would cherish this song, this dance, this moment in his heart forever as a testament to his first and only love. The music rippled around them, through them. Their footsteps were so light together as they were meant to be partners, and if they could only find the right song, they could take off into the night and dance among the stars. This feeling was so familiar, and yet Adrien knew he had never held her like this except in his dreams. His steps slowed, and she followed his lead. They stood, lost in each other's eyes, for a long moment while the music slowed as well. As the last treble notes died away, he leaned towards her, running his hand up her arm to cup her face and weaving into her hair. He held his breath, fearing her rejection, but she rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips brushed once, twice, and then he pulled her closer. How long he had waited, wanted this, to feel the longing ache in his chest with her. This woman has his entire world. He would do anything she asked of him in this moment. Adrien pulled away, dizzy from her presence and lack of air, but her lips chased his. Her hands were in his hair now, and she was pulling him down to her. Oh, Caramber. This is what it was like for love to be requited. No, this was more than that. This was passion. If a single word could describe the heat she poured into that kiss, and possessive in a way that she pulled his face towards her, and the sensation of fireworks that ricocheted through his chest. Then nothing mattered anymore, save for the taste of her lips, and the scent of her hair, and the warmth, soft touch filling his arms. At last she broke away, leaving them both breathless and panting. He was pretty sure his face was as red as hers, but he didn't care. His lady had kissed him. She had let him kiss her and kissed him back in a way that he never imagined. Maybe this was just a dream. Maybe he had fallen asleep as soon as he lay down and he was having the most incredible dream of his life. If this was a dream, there was no harm in saying the words that he had longed to say. "I love you, Ladybug," he whispered, stroking the edge of her mask with his fingers that were certainly braver than he felt. "I have been in love with you for the last 3 years, and I would love you forever if you'd let me." The smile on her lips seemed too big for her face. "I love you too, Adrien." She brushed a strand of her hair out of his eyes and with a loving hand and sighed. "But I can't put you at risk. Hot Moth will take advantage of any weakness, and I don't know what I would do if you got hurt because of me." Adrien knew he was smirking, but he was so pleased and flattered that he couldn't help it. "Oh, does that mean I'm a lady's weak spot? I thought the unbeatable Ladybug had no weakness." Either she didn't notice his use of Cat's nickname for her, or she just took it as a compliment. "You have no idea. I once nearly gave up my Miraculous for you." He stared at her, slack-jawed. When had that been? He searched his memories, struggling to possess what she had said just oh. Hadn't Valentina threatened to drop an illusion of me off the Eiffel Tower back in the early days? She had loved me that long? That was why she was so upset? "I think I enjoy being your secret weakness," he murmured, leaning in for another kiss, but she put her finger to his lips instead. The little whimper that slipped out of his throat made her blush a deep red. "Adrien, we really shouldn't," she said sadly. "I don't want to put you in any danger by being seen with you, and if you kiss me again, it will only make it harder to go away."
"Are you saying my kisses are distracting?"
She ducked her head down between her shoulders, looking up at him through her lashes.
"Yes."
Her voice was higher pitched and nervous. She was so cute. He took her face in his hands and tilted it up so he could see her lovely eyes.
"Good. Because I find yours intoxicating."
Her hands wrapped around his wrists. "I love you, Adrien. I always have, ever since that first day when you..." Suddenly her earrings beeped, leaving her to mutter, "Blast you, Tiki," under her breath.
"I take it you need to go,"
he said, not letting on he knew she hadn't used a lucky charm, and thus had been her Kwame telling her not to give too much away.
"I told no one about Aspect. You know, I can keep a secret. Or about Gat Noir, but that's beside the point."
Ladybug smiled at him. Suddenly, she popped up to plant a kiss on his cheek. "So, come and find me, my prince. I'm closer than you'd know." She dashed to the window, whipping out a yo-yo, and out into the night and leaping into the edge of the window. She paused for one last look at him, her eyes shining as she blew him a kiss. He reached out, grasping the air as if catching her kiss in his hand, and placed it over his heart. And then she was gone, taking his heart with her and leaving only its thunder echoing in his chest. Adrien stared after her, his cheeks burning where her lips had pressed.
"She loves me, Blag!"
he cried, rushing back to the bed and throwing the pillows to one side.
"We danced, we kissed, and she told me that she loves me. This is the happiest day of my life." "Tone it down, kid, before you wake the entire house." "But did you hear her? She said she loves me, has loved me as long as I have loved her." "Good for you," his little friend said dryly. "So, what do you plan to do about it?" "I'm gonna find her."
Yes, Ladybug had told him they knew each other outside the mask. She had said that she was closer than he knew. Adrien would find her, and then he would protect her identity, and they could still be together. He wasn't going to waste the chance this incredible night had given him.
"She is already mine. All I have to do is find her." "Well, if you're going to look for the bug in disguise, then I suggest you get some sleep. It sounds like you're gonna be in for a long day tomorrow."
Adrien chuckled, scratching Plag's head with his finger.
"You're probably right. Let me get out these things and we'll turn in."
But first he retrieved his phone and set Mirage Amour on a loop. As he headed to the bathroom to get changed ready for bed, his little black Kwame put his tiny paws to his forehead with a sigh.
"Oh, Sugar Cube is gonna kill me."
Thank you for listening to Lost in the Crowd, Part 1. Make sure you look out for Part 2 coming out next Sunday, called Kissed in the Rain. Make sure you smash that like button, comment down below what you think of it, and subscribe. Send out lots of love to Shika for writing this and for Fusion November. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.